Imagine being on a pirate ship in the middle of the ocean. The salty wind cuts your skin, the deck creaks beneath your feet, and every man around you carries scars. But the real danger isn't just cannonballs or sword fights. The true terror lurks in a cut that won't heal, a fever that won't break, or a broken bone that leaves you helpless, while waves keep tossing the ship. Medicine on a pirate ship was not just crew, was terrifying. Yet strangely, some of their bizarre remedies actually worked, saving lives in ways that sound unbelievable today. And if you were unlucky enough to be wounded at sea, your fate depended not on a doctor, but on sailors with blades, rum, and a handful of tricks passed down from desperate men before them. Before we dive into these grim yet fascinating cures, let me ask you for something small. If you're enjoying this story already, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop a comment telling me where you're rewatching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far these tales travel across the world, even centuries after the pirates themselves vanished. Now, let's return to the ship. Imagine a cut from a sword fight. Today, you'd get stitches, antibiotics, maybe a tetanus shot. But on a pirate ship, there were none of those luxuries. Instead, wounds were often closed by pouring boiling oil or hot tar directly onto the flesh. The agony must have been unbearable. The flesh would sizzle, smoke rising, while the injured man screamed. But here's the shocking part. This brutal method actually sealed the wound and reduced bleeding, preventing infection in some cases. It was a terrible trait, unimaginable pain and permanent scarring, but sometimes it meant survival. Pirates also relied heavily on rum, not just to drink, but as their closest thing to antiseptic. If you fell and split your leg, they might pour rum straight into the wound. It burned like fire, but it killed some of the bacteria. Afterward, they'd force you to drink more rum to dull the pain before attempting any crude surgery. In a way, rum was both an anesthetic and disinfectant, though often it made men pass out or vomit before the procedure was even done. Toothaches were another nightmare. Sailors lived on hard biscuits, salted meat, and almost no fresh vegetables. Scurvy rotted their gums, teeth loosened, and infections spread through the jaw. When the pain became unbearable, the only solution was to pull the tooth out. But there were no proper tools. Sometimes a ship's cook would do it with pliers meant for metal, or even with the edge of a knife. Blood poured, the jaw swelled, but with luck, the infection eased. And sometimes, against all odds, the man healed. But the real horrors came with amputations. Picture this. You're struck by a splinter of wood from a cannon blast. Your leg is shattered. The only way to save you is to cut it off. On land, at least you might have a surgeon. At sea, it was often just the quartermaster or an experienced sailor. They'd strap you down, hand you a rope to bite, give you a gulp of rum, and then, without hesitation, slice through the flesh with a saw. The speed mattered. The quicker the cut, the greater your chance of surviving the shock. Then came the cauterization. A red-hot iron pressed against the stump, sealing vessels in a hiss of smoke. It was barbaric, but men lived, and here's the strange truth. Because pirates worked in groups and shared loot equally, they often cared for their wounded comrades better than navies did. Losing a man meant losing strength, so the crew tried harder to keep their brothers alive. And this leads us to another forgotten detail. Pirates actually had their own code of medical compensation. A man who lost a leg might receive extra gold from the next plunder, sometimes even enough to live on land comfortably. In a brutal world, this was a kind of twisted insurance system. It encouraged loyalty and gave injured pirates a reason to keep fighting. Some of their treatments sound like superstition, but they hid fragments of wisdom. For fever, pirates sometimes used bark from certain trees. We now know that quinine, found in bark, reduces malaria symptoms. They didn't understand the science, but through trial and error, they stumbled onto remedies that genuinely worked. For stomach pain, they chewed ginger. For seasickness, they sucked on lemons or limes if they could steal them. Without knowing it, they were fighting scurvy, the disease that silently killed thousands of sailors. But not all cures were helpful. Pirates believed gunpowder could disinfect wounds. They'd rub it directly into cuts. It stung, it blackened the flesh, and though it might kill some germs, more often it made infections worse. They also used urine as a cleanser because it was sterile when fresh. Desperate times made men reach for desperate solutions. The smell of a pirate ship was not something you'd want to imagine. Still, there were moments of brilliance. Some pirates carried herbal knowledge from Africa, the Caribbean, or Asia. Enslaved people who escaped onto ships often became healers, teaching remedies unknown to Europeans. Aloe for burns, garlic for infections, tobacco leaves as a makeshift bandage, small things that could make the difference between life and death. These cures traveled the seas, spreading across ships like whispered secrets. The line between survival and death was razor thin. Imagine lying in a dark cabin, lanterns swaying, the smell of blood and salt thick in the air. Your crewmates gather around, deciding whether to cut or wait. Every sound, the scrape of metal, the splash of rum, the groan of the waves marks, the fragile thread holding you to life. And while today we'd call their methods crude, many of us wouldn't have lasted a week in their world. There's also a paradox here. Pirates were feared as killers, yet among themselves they often showed more care than the empires hunting them. A Navy sailor crippled in battle was discarded, left to beg on the streets. A pirate, on the other hand, might receive a share of treasure for life. Perhaps it wasn't kindness, but practicality. Still, it created a strange form of brotherhood, where brutal medicine was softened by solidarity. When we analyze their remedies, we find a curious pattern. Pain was constant, infection was the enemy, and time was always against them. They lacked science, yet through instinct and experimentation, they discovered pieces of what modern medicine confirms. Alcohol cleans wounds. Certain herbs reduce fever. Fresh fruit prevents scurvy. And quick surgery, though rough, saves lives. They worked with what they had: steel, fire, plants, and courage. But here's the haunting thought. How many sailors died screaming? Experiments etched into their flesh so that others might learn. How many myths of cures came from corpses floating in the sea, their stories carried only in whispers? Pirate medicine was not just survival. It was evolution, forged in agony, one body at a time. The next time you hear about pirates, don't just picture swords and treasure chests. Imagine the hidden reality below deck, the improvised operating room, the smell of burnt flesh, the shouts of men holding down their brother while the surgeon's saw did its work. That was the true battlefield, silent and unseen, where death claimed more men than cannon fire ever could. In the end, the strangest truth is this: some of those bizarre remedies actually paved the way for later discoveries. Without knowing it, pirates became accidental scientists of survival. They didn't leave behind medical textbooks, but they left scars, stories, and a reminder of human resilience in the harshest of conditions. And so, the next time you sip rum or slice a lime, remember that once, centuries ago, those same things stood between a pirate and his grave. Strange remedies, born of desperation, kept the black flag flying just a little longer. If you want more untold stories like this, make sure to subscribe. Adventure is only just beginning.